Usually when we talk about a psychological predator, there is this expectation of visibility, like a cinematic villain, I guess.
Right, yeah.
Like you expect to see them coming.
Exactly. I mean, evolution has equipped us with a fairly robust threat detection system. If we're walking through the woods and we hear a low growl or we see a predator baring its teeth, our amygdala fires up.
Your adrenaline floods the system.
Yeah, and we know to run. And in the realm of human psychology, we often expect the exact same clear signaling.
Oh, absolutely.
Like when we picture a narcissist, we immediately picture the loud, boastful, overtly arrogant person who walks into a room and just, bulldozes over everyone's boundaries.
With absolute terrifying confidence.
Yes, and they demand that all eyes are on them. We see the aggression, the alarm bells ring, and we know exactly where the danger is.
Because it's measurable. I mean, it takes up physical and acoustic space in the room.
You can point to the behavior in real time, look at the person next to you, and both agree, like, wow, that individual is toxic. The overt narcissist operates completely in the daylight.
But then you step into the world of covert pathology, and suddenly, that ancient evolutionary early warning system we have, it's completely useless.
It is entirely broken.
Yeah, we are looking at a relational landscape that is incredibly murky here. Because we aren't looking for a wolf burying its teeth anymore. We're looking for the emotional equivalent of a stonefish.
Oh, that's a really good analogy.
Right, something that blends perfectly into the environment. It looks like a harmless rock, basically, until you step on it.
Yeah, and then you're poisoned.
Exactly. We are looking for someone who is quiet, someone who is highly sensitive, someone who might even be like profoundly self-deprecating.
Sitting in the corner of the room.
Yeah, sitting there radiating this aura of fragile vulnerability. And it makes you want to walk over, put a hand on their shoulder, and take care of them.
Yeah.
And that is the exact moment the trap closes.
That is the absolute definition of psychological camouflage. I mean, the danger doesn't announce itself with a roar.
No, it whispers.
It whispers, and it invites you in through your own compassion. And that is what makes it so uniquely devastating.
Which brings us to the mission for today's deep dive. We are going to unmask the covert narcissist.
I am so glad we're doing this.
Me too. To figure this out, we are pulling from a massive, incredibly dense stack of sources today. We are looking at clinical psychology journals detailing the neuroscience of trauma.
There's some really fascinating stuff in there.
Oh, yeah. And we've got behavioral science papers breaking down interpersonal manipulation alongside hundreds of firsthand anonymous accounts from survivor forums.
Which is crucial to see how it actually plays out in real life.
Exactly. To see how these clinical theories play out in living rooms and text messages. We are pulling back the curtain on the psychological architecture of emotional manipulation here.
It's going to be a lot to unpack.
It is. We're going to explore this terrifying, destabilizing phenomenon known as narcissistic collapse.
Yes, that's a big one.
And most importantly, we are going to give you, the listener, the behavioral science tools you need to actually break free from these invisible, toxic relationship patterns.
Because you really need tools to survive this.
You do. And to help us navigate these deep waters, I have the calm voice of reason sitting right across from me, ready to help synthesize all this clinical data.
Well, I'm very glad we are tackling this topic. Today, we're going to understand not just what these individuals do, because, looking at the behaviors in isolation can be maddeningly confusing.
Oh, totally. You feel like you're going crazy.
You really do. So we are going to dig into the underlying machinery. We will explore the unconscious neuroscience, the early childhood attachment wounds, and the deep psychological mechanics driving their behavior.
Because we have to understand the engine beneath the hood, right?
Exactly. We have to understand the engine of this manipulation if we are ever going to help people recognize it in their own lives.
Okay, let's unpack this because we should start with the foundation. The very first thing we have to confront in the literature is this massive contradiction.
The paradox.
Right, the core paradox of the introverted narcissist. When we look at the psychological models, specifically the big five personality traits, the clinical papers point out that covert narcissists, they're also referred to in the literature as vulnerable narcissists, right?
Yes, vulnerable narcissist is the clinical term you'll see a lot.
So they score exceptionally high in introversion and extremely high in neuroticism. Now, before we go further, let's make sure we define our terms for everyone. When the literature talks about the big five and neuroticism in this context, what are we actually looking at?
So the big five is the gold standard model in psychology for describing human personality. It measures openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism.
Okay.
And neuroticism is essentially a measure of emotional stability. Someone who scores high in neuroticism is highly prone to experiencing negative emotions.
So they're just naturally more anxious.
Yeah, they are highly susceptible to anxiety, depression, self-doubt, and emotional volatility. They perceive the world as threatening, and they interpret ordinary situations as incredibly stressful.
Which feels completely counterintuitive to the general public's understanding of narcissism.
It really does.
Because if I think of a narcissist, I think of someone who is highly extroverted, very low in neuroticism, and possessing this, like, impenetrable, bulletproof confidence.
Right, the person taking up all the space in the room.
Yeah. But the covert narcissist appears shy. They seem deeply self-conscious. The sources mention they often struggle with severe social anxiety.
Very often, yes.
They present to the world as a victim or a martyr. Someone carrying the heavy, unfair weight of the world on their shoulders.
Like life is just so hard for them specifically.
Exactly. Yet secretly, beneath that timid, anxious exterior, the literature says they harbor this massively overinflated sense of self-importance and entitlement.
It's a really jarring disconnect.
It is. How can a person simultaneously feel like they are better than everyone else, but also be terrified of the world?
Well, we have to look at the concept of the split self-image. To truly grasp how this contradiction exists in one human brain, we have to travel back to their early developmental trauma.
Okay, so this starts in childhood.
Almost always. The clinical consensus suggests that in the background of a covert narcissist, there are profound early experiences of feeling fundamentally unlovable, unacceptable, or utterly worthless.
Wow. Just feeling completely defective.
Exactly. And this isn't just about having a strict parent, this is about emotional neglect, or what we call conditional love.
Conditional love, so they only get love if they perform.
Right. Imagine a child who only receives affection or even basic acknowledgement when they perform perfectly, like when they get straight A's or when they look a certain way or when they keep completely quiet.
But the moment they mess up,
The very moment they show a flaw, express a messy emotion, or fail, that love is instantly withdrawn and replaced with harsh criticism or icy silence.
so the lesson that child's developing brain internalizes is that their authentic, messy, vulnerable self is fundamentally defective. Like, it's dangerous to be real.
It is not just dangerous. The authentic self becomes associated with intolerable, agonizing shame.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, for a young child, the withdrawal of a parent's love feels like a literal threat to their survival. So to survive this psychological agony, the child's mind constructs a brilliant, desperate defense mechanism.
It builds a false self, right?
Yes, a grandiose fantasy of superiority. The child's unconscious mind convinces itself, I am not worthless and unlovable. In fact, I am special. I am unique.
I'm better than them.
Exactly. I am intellectually and spiritually superior to everyone around me. The world just doesn't realize my genius yet.
I see. It's a survival strategy. It's armor.
It is absolute armor.
But because they are naturally introverted or because their neuroticism is so high, they lack the extroverted bravado to go out into the world and demand that everyone bow down to them.
Right. They can't just walk into a boardroom and take over.
They can't act like the overt narcissist. So it's like they build this towering, magnificent castle of grandiosity, but they hide it entirely inside a dense, thorny fortress of anxiety and victimhood.
That is a brilliant way to visualize it. The castle of grandiosity is completely hidden, and here is the hidden emotional need that drives every single action they take for the rest of their lives.
What is it?
They desperately crave what we call narcissistic supply.
Narcissistic supply. We hear that term a lot, but what does it actually mean in this context?
Narcissistic supply is attention, validation, admiration, sympathy, and control. It is the psychological oxygen that keeps their false self alive.
So they literally need it to breathe psychologically.
Yes. Without that constant stream of external validation, the false self begins to suffocate, and that underlying, unbearable childhood shame threatens to break through the surface and consume them.
That sounds terrifying for them, honestly. But because they are trapped in that fortress of anxiety, because they fear rejection so deeply, they can't just walk onto a stage and demand applause.
No, they can't risk the exposure.
Right. If an overt narcissist wants supply, they just brag about their sports car or their promotion. The covert narcissist has to extract this supply through the back door.
Exactly.
They have to get you to give it to them without looking like they're asking for it.
Which forces them to get very creative. If they cannot demand the spotlight through sheer charisma, they have to steal it by hacking your empathy.
Wow. Hacking your empathy.
Yeah.
This brings us to a behavioral pattern the sources call the altruism trap.
This is a really common one.
Yeah, reading through the survivor forums, this is where so many people get caught. The forums are filled with stories of covert narcissists going completely out of their way to do good deeds.
Oh, they love doing good deeds.
They volunteer at the church, they take on extra shifts at work to help out the team, they cook elaborate, exhausting dinners for the family.
And from the outside, it looks like genuine, selfless altruism.
Right, it looks amazing. But reading the psychological breakdown, it reminds me of a Trojan horse.
That's exactly what it is.
It is this beautiful, generous gift wheeled into your city. But secretly, it houses a hidden army of unstated expectations, massive demands for gratitude, and emotional debts that you never even agreed to take on.
It is an entirely transactional way of moving through the world. But the terms of the transaction are completely hidden from the victim.
So how does that play out?
Let's look at the mechanics of this. If an overt narcissist does you a favor, say they buy you an expensive watch, they will loudly remind you of it.
Right, they'll say, look at this amazing thing I did for you. I'm the best.
Exactly. A covert narcissist does you a favor, like spending 6 hours cleaning the house, but they do it while sighing heavily, rubbing their lower back, and looking utterly exhausted.
Oh my gosh, the heavy sighing. I read about that so much in the forums.
The sighing is a very deliberate signal. If you do not offer the exact, overwhelming level of praise, sympathy, and gratitude that they secretly feel entitled to, they will become deeply resentful.
So they aren't just cleaning the house because they want a clean house.
No. They are not performing acts of service out of genuine care for your well-being or even for the house. They are performing acts of service as a covert method of extracting validation. They are purchasing your admiration with their suffering.
When I read that part of the research, I really had to pause and reason through it, because it is so counter to how empathy works.
It completely scrambles your brain.
It does. Because if I see someone saying, I'm such a terrible friend, or I look horrible today, or I always ruin everything, my immediate instinct is to say, no, you don't. You're wonderful.
Which is the normal empathetic response.
Right. But wait, if they are constantly putting themselves down, how on earth is that narcissistic? Isn't that just a person struggling with low self-esteem or clinical depression?
This is perhaps the most common point of confusion for the general public.
Yeah, how does a clinical professional even tell the difference between someone who is genuinely depressed and a covert narcissist?
It's a great question, and it is the very reason this pathology remains hidden in plain sight. To differentiate them, we have to look past the words being spoken and analyze the function of the behavior in the room.
Okay, the function.
Yes. When someone with healthy, albeit low, self-esteem or someone with depression puts themselves down, they are usually expressing genuine internal pain.
And they usually want to connect, right?
Exactly. If you offer them reassurance, they might shyly accept it, they might cry, or they might want to talk about why they feel that way. It opens a dialogue.
Okay, so it brings you closer.
Right. But when a covert narcissist says, I'm such a loser, or nobody even cares that I'm here, it is a highly calculated, albeit sometimes unconscious tactic known in behavioral science as fishing for supply.
Fishing for supply. It's essentially emotional bait.
It is a meticulously designed lure. The moment they drop their shoulders and say, I am so ugly today, they are instantly forcing you into a caretaking role.
Because you feel obligated to fix it.
The unwritten rules of human social convention dictate that you must immediately stop whatever you are doing, cross the room, and respond with, no, you aren't. You look beautiful. Why would you say that?
Wow.
By playing the victim, by weaponizing their own fragility, they demand immediate, on-the-spot reassurance. It is a forceful extraction of your energy, completely disguised as humility.
That is just so wild to think about.
It is a way of commanding the entire emotional focus of the room without ever looking like they're demanding attention.
When you break it down like that, the term emotional vampirism gets thrown around a lot in pop psychology. But I want to ground this in the clinical reality.
It's an apt metaphor, though.
It really feels like vampirism to the victim. But what we are actually looking at is a nonstop, desperate campaign for narcissistic supply extraction.
Yes, 2047.
And the insidious part is that they invite you to offer your own neck. You think you are comforting a wounded bird, but you are actually feeding a predator that refuses to hunt for its own self-esteem.
Refuses to regulate their own emotions.
Exactly. And once you are drawn into this dynamic, once your nervous system gets used to constantly monitoring their moods, managing their fragile emotions, and providing this steady stream of reassurance just to keep the peace.
That's when the trap truly snaps shut.
That is when the environment shifts. That is when the real psychological warfare begins.
It is a war of attrition, fought entirely in the shadows.
So if the victim is now locked into this caretaking role, the behavior of the narcissist changes. They don't typically scream or throw plates at the wall like an overt abuser might.
No, that would ruin the victim mask.
Right. So their primary weapons are passive aggression and covert hostility. We are talking about the silent treatment that lasts for 3 days over a perceived slight.
Backhanded compliments are huge here, too.
Oh, yeah. Deliberate sabotage, forgetting to pay a crucial bill, or showing up 3 hours late to your graduation, ruining the event without ever raising their voice.
All deniable.
What is happening inside their neural pathways when they engage in this quiet destruction?
What is happening is that they are experiencing intense, consuming envy and resentment. Covert narcissists live in a state of constant, agonizing comparison.
Like they're always keeping score.
Always. If you achieve something at work, if you are simply happy on a Tuesday morning, or if you establish a boundary that asserts your independence, it triggers their deep-seated pathological belief that life is fundamentally unfair to them.
Just because you're happy.
Yes. In their grandiose fantasy, they deserve all the success and happiness that you are currently experiencing. However, because their neuroticism is so high, they are terrified of direct confrontation.
Because they might lose the fight.
Exactly. Direct confrontation risks them being out-argued, exposed, or rejected. They cannot express this seething anger openly without shattering their carefully crafted mask of the sweet, innocent victim.
So that boiling water has to escape somewhere. It leaks out sideways.
It leaks out sideways in 1,000 tiny, deniable cuts. Let's look at the example you gave of them being 3 hours late to an important event.
Yeah, that happens all the time.
If you finally get upset and confront them about it, they will instantly retreat into victimhood.
What does that sound like?
They will say, "I can't believe you're attacking me," the moment I walk in the door. "You know how much anxiety I have about driving on the highway? I tried my best to get here for you, but I guess my best just isn't good enough. I ruin everything."
Oh my God. Just hearing you say that makes my chest tight.
It's incredibly manipulative. In a matter of seconds, they have completely inverted the reality of the situation. Suddenly, you are the aggressor, and you find yourself apologizing to them for their bad behavior.
The hidden emotional need there is so twisted, it's about feeling powerful.
Exactly.
By keeping you constantly off balance, by making you perpetually guess what mood they are in or what invisible rule you just broke, they maintain absolute control over the relational climate.
Control is the ultimate objective for them, and the effect on the victim's psychology is profound. The clinical term we use to describe the victim's experience is crazy-making.
Crazy-making, which is basically gaslighting, right?
It is the core mechanism of gaslighting, yes. Because the covert narcissist's public persona, the face they show to your friends, your family, your coworkers, it is meticulously crafted as this humble, giving, sensitive person.
A nice guy.
Yeah.
The sweet girl.
Right. No one else sees the 3-day silent treatments. No one else hears the constant draining sighs.
So when you try to explain to your sister that you were being emotionally abused because your partner forgot your birthday and then moped around the house acting sad that you were disappointed.
It sounds incredibly petty to an outsider.
It really does. You sound like you're complaining about nothing. You sound like the crazy one.
Which is exactly what the narcissist wants. You become isolated in your own distorted reality. Your friends might even defend the narcissist, saying, "Oh, come on, he's such a nice guy, he probably just made a mistake."
Wow, so you start doubting yourself.
Completely. This isolation makes you doubt your own memory and your own sanity, driving you further into dependency on the narcissist to define reality for you.
And this ties directly into what I found to be the most chilling aspect of the entire stack of research. The empathy void.
Yes. The void is terrifying.
One of the most recurring themes across all the psychological literature and survivor stories we reviewed is this terrifying lack of emotional reciprocity.
It's completely one-sided.
Totally. A covert narcissist expects endless, bottomless support for their anxieties. You're expected to stay up until 3:00 a.m., rubbing their back, soothing their fears about, like, slightly weird email they got from their boss.
And you do it because you care.
But the moment the tables turn, the moment you get the flu or you lose a loved one or you simply need a shoulder to cry on,
You are met with a flat, detached, chillingly empty stare. Or, more commonly, irritation.
yes. The irritation. I read so many stories of victims crying over a dying parent, and the narcissist gets visibly annoyed.
It happens so frequently.
Why? What is the psychological mechanism that produces annoyance in the face of a partner's grief?
This brings us to a horrifying realization about how the narcissist views other human beings. To a neurotypical person, a partner or a friend is a separate, autonomous entity with their own rich inner life, their own inherent value, and their own legitimate needs.
Right, they're a whole person.
You feel empathy because you recognize their shared humanity. To a covert narcissist, you are not a separate human being, you are an extension of them. The clinical analogy often used is that you are an appliance.
An appliance, like a literal toaster or a refrigerator.
Literal appliance. You are an emotional regulation appliance.
Wow.
Your sole designated function in their universe is to regulate their self-esteem, absorb their projected shame, and provide a steady output of narcissistic supply.
That is so hard to wrap my head around.
Now, think about your relationship with a toaster.
Okay.
When a toaster breaks, you do not sit down and feel deep, genuine empathy for the toaster's internal wiring.
No, I just want my toast.
Right. You feel intensely annoyed that you cannot make toast. When you, the victim, get sick or experience grief or demand emotional support, you are failing to perform your function. You are a broken appliance.
Oh my God.
They are irritated because they now have to deal with the inconvenience of their own emotional regulation, a task they are developmentally incapable of performing.
That is absolutely devastating to conceptualize, because it means the victim has likely poured years of their life, their deepest empathy, their boundless love, and their care into this bottomless pit.
All for nothing.
Right, operating under the neurotypical assumption that if they just loved this person enough, the person would finally feel safe enough to heal.
But you cannot heal them.
Because they do not look at you and see a person capable of delivering healing. They look at you and see a battery that they are slowly, methodically draining.
And what's fascinating here is how the narcissist's inability to regulate their own emotions forces them to use you as their external emotional regulator. And this explains why the pattern repeats for so long.
The victim just keeps trying.
The victim, who is very often someone with extraordinarily high empathy, gets trapped in a savior cycle. They keep trying to fix the narcissist's childhood wounds, but you cannot pour enough love into a container that has no bottom.
It's mathematically impossible.
The physics of the relationship guarantee that the victim will eventually run empty.
So eventually the inevitable happens. The victim gets completely exhausted. The battery dies.
They just can't do it anymore.
They hit a breaking point, and they attempt to set a boundary. They say, no, I cannot stay up until 3 a.m. tonight. I have a presentation tomorrow. Or they physically pull away. Or perhaps in a professional setting, the covert narcissist gets passed over for a promotion they secretly felt entitled to.
Some kind of rupture occurs.
Right. What happens when that appliance stops working? That is when the scaffolding holding up the false self fails. Let's delve into the mechanics of the narcissistic collapse.
The narcissistic collapse is not a tantrum. It is a severe state of psychological decompensation.
It's a full breakdown.
Yes. It is the terrifying moment when the false self, that carefully constructed, lifelong, grandiose fantasy, shatters, and the underlying reality of their shame breaches the surface.
The clinical texts refer to the trigger of this collapse as a narcissistic injury. How do we define that in practical terms? Like, what actually causes it?
A narcissistic injury occurs anytime reality forcefully contradicts the narcissist's grandiose self-image. Now, for an overt narcissist, this might require a massive public humiliation, like getting fired or caught in a major lie.
Right.
But with a covert narcissist, because their ego is so incredibly fragile and hypervigilant, the injury can be remarkably small to an outside observer.
Like what?
It could be you calmly stating that you don't like a movie they recommended.
Wait, really? Just disliking a movie?
Yes. Or it could be a coworker offering mild constructive feedback on a spreadsheet. It could simply be watching someone else receive praise in their presence. Anything that implies they are not the center of the universe or that they are flawed registers as a mortal threat.
So when that external validation, the supply, is suddenly removed or threatened, what is happening biologically and neurologically inside their brain?
We can draw a highly accurate parallel to severe chemical withdrawal.
Like drug withdrawal.
Exactly. Neurochemically, the narcissist has been relying entirely on the external environment to medicate their internal agonizing shame. They use your validation the way an addict uses a substance.
Wow.
When you remove the drug by setting a boundary, they experience profound dysphoria. Dysphoria is a state of deep, unbearable unease, generalized dissatisfaction and emotional pain.
It sounds awful.
It is. As the withdrawal sets in, their psychological defenses fail. They lose access to the false self, and they are suddenly dropped into the abyss of their true, undefended core, a place filled with self-loathing, emptiness, and terror.
And this internal shattering manifests behaviorally in some truly bizarre, often frightening ways. Let's break down the behavioral signatures of a collapse based on the case studies.
There are distinct phases to it.
First, the sources identify withdrawal and somatic regression. Let's define that, because somatic regression sounds highly clinical. What does it actually look like in a human body?
Somatic regression means the psychological stress is so overwhelming that it translates into physical symptoms, often reverting the body to a childlike or infantile state.
Infantile? Like how?
A covert narcissist in collapse might literally curl into the fetal position on the floor.
You mean an adult just curled up on the rug?
Yes, they might lose the ability to speak in full sentences, communicating only in groans or monosyllables. They might drop off social media entirely, stop showering, or retreat into fantasy worlds like video games for days on end, sleeping excessively.
That is so extreme.
It is the nervous system completely shutting down. They are powering down to avoid any further contact with a reality that has injured them.
But the alarming part is that it doesn't stay quiet. It evolves. Because once the initial shutdown passes, the panic of the withdrawal sets in, and it shifts into surveillance and paranoia.
The desperate scrambling phase.
Right. The victim might have moved out, but suddenly the narcissist is obsessively monitoring them. We read accounts of burner phone calls, endless stalking of social media profiles, driving past the victim's workplace, or orchestrating accidental bump-ins at the grocery store.
This is the absolute desperation for supply kicking in. The withdrawal from validation is too painful to sustain, so they begin a frantic, highly disorganized attempt to regain narrative control over the person who injured them.
And what about the paranoia?
The paranoia is a classic defense mechanism called projection. Because the narcissist is harboring intense hostility and resentment toward you for abandoning them, they unconsciously project those feelings onto you.
So they think you are out to get them.
They assume you are plotting against them, trying to destroy their reputation, which justifies their increasingly unhinged surveillance.
And then comes the most potent, confusing weapon in the entire collapse phase: relational recruitment.
This is where so many victims get pulled back in.
This specific insight from the clinical journals fundamentally changed how I view manipulative behavior. The collapse, sobbing on the floor, the complete helplessness, the extreme, visceral victimhood. It isn't just a byproduct of their pain. It is a highly evolved recruitment mechanism.
Exactly. Which is to say, it serves a secondary active purpose. The display of distress is evolutionarily designed to pull you, or anyone in the vicinity, back into a caretaking role.
Like a distress beacon.
It is the stress signal meant to trigger the rescuer instinct in empathetic people.
I have to reason through this with you, because this is where my own empathy gets totally scrambled, and I know listeners will feel the same.
It's very tricky to navigate.
When I read about a covert narcissist in the middle of a collapse, when they are weeping hysterically, hyperventilating, saying their life is over, perhaps even threatening self-harm, I have to ask, is this a calculated Machiavellian act where they are fake crying to control me, or are they genuinely in agony?
This is perhaps the hardest psychological concept for highly empathetic people to grasp, because our brains want to categorize it as either.
Right, it's either fake or real.
But the clinical reality is that it is both. It is a profound psychological paradox. The distress they are feeling, the panic, the emptiness, the somatic pain of the shame is 100% real. They are in genuine, profound agony. Their nervous system is on fire.
Okay, so they aren't faking the pain.
No. And simultaneously, the outward display of that agony is an unconscious, highly manipulative tool designed to force you to abandon your newly set boundaries and rescue them. The pain is entirely real, and the pain is a weapon. Both realities exist in the same moment.
Wow. The pain is real, and the pain is a weapon.
Exactly.
So the victim responds to the pain. If you hear them crying and your empathy overrides your boundaries and you run over and say, oh my God, it's okay, I'm here, I'm not leaving you, you are effectively validating the weapon.
Yes. You are teaching their nervous system that extreme emotional blackmail yields the desired result.
You are handing them the drug they are withdrawing from. You are giving them back their supply.
And the tragic irony is that the moment they feel secure again, the moment the false self is reinflated and back online, the abuse will inevitably resume.
It goes right back to the silent treatment.
In fact, it will often be worse than before, because unconsciously, the narcissist now deeply resents you for seeing them in such a pathetic, weakened state of collapse. They have to punish you to regain their sense of superiority.
This desperate biological need to recruit you back into their web leads us directly into a specific behavioral science phenomenon. If the victim manages to survive the extinction burst of the collapse and actually get some physical or emotional distance, you'd think the nightmare is over.
You'd hope so.
But there is a tactic designed to completely hack your nervous system and pull you back in. Let's examine the mechanics of hoovering and the trauma bond.
Hoovering is a term coined by survivors, named appropriately after the Hoover vacuum cleaner, because the behavior is designed to suck you back into the toxic dynamic.
Let's look at how the vacuum effect actually operates in the wild. You've managed to get some distance, maybe you've moved out, you've gone to a different department at work, or you've stopped returning their texts. Weeks, or maybe even months, go by. The dust starts to settle.
You start to feel okay again.
And then, out of nowhere, on a random Tuesday afternoon, ping, a text message.
The dreaded text.
And it's never aggressive. It's usually something like, I drove by our old favorite restaurant today and thought of you, hope you're okay. Or it's a long, beautifully written email apologizing for everything, taking full accountability, and promising that they have had a massive life-altering breakthrough in therapy.
Or the crisis text.
Oh, right. Conversely, it's a sudden claim of a crisis. My dog died, and I know we aren't talking, but you're the only one who understands my grief. Why, after months of silence, is this happening now?
It is entirely an issue of supply logistics. They are currently lacking supply. Their current sources of validation, perhaps a new partner or a new friend group, have either dried up, seen through the mask, or simply become boring.
So they go back to the well.
So the narcissist scans their mental Rolodex of past victims. It requires significantly less energy to reactivate an old, preconditioned source of supply than it does to groom a brand new one. They are throwing out a fishing line, using nostalgia, pity, or feigned growth as bait to see if you'll bite.
And this is where we have to dive deep into the neuroscience, because the betrayal the victim experiences isn't just psychological, it's chemical. Let's break down the neurochemistry of the victim when that hoovering text comes through.
This is so important to understand.
Because a victim might know, logically, having read all the books, that this person is toxic. They might have sworn to their friends that they would never go back. But when that text arrives, and the narcissist is suddenly acting like the sweet, vulnerable, attentive person you first fell in love with, your brain completely betrays you.
It is a biochemical hijacking. Throughout the duration of the abusive relationship, the victim's brain was subjected to chronically high levels of cortisol, the primary stress hormone.
From the constant anxiety.
You were living in a constant draining state of hyperarousal, walking on eggshells, trying to anticipate the narcissist's next mood swing. Cortisol erodes the body. It causes exhaustion, brain fog, and physical illness.
So your nervous system is essentially starving for relief from the constant threat.
Precisely. And when the abuser suddenly shifts gears, when they send that sweet text or offer a seemingly genuine apology, they provide the relief. When they validate you, your brain is instantly flooded with a massive, overwhelming wave of dopamine and oxytocin.
Oh, the feel-good chemicals.
Yes. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter associated with reward, pleasure, and motivation. Oxytocin is the neurochemical associated with bonding, trust, and physical connection. The sudden, extreme contrast between the agonizingly high cortisol and the euphoric rush of dopamine creates a chemical bond that is incredibly intense.
We're talking about the mechanics of the trauma bond.
We are. A trauma bond is not just a strong emotional attachment. It is a physiological addiction formed through a process of intermittent reinforcement.
Intermittent reinforcement.
It occurs when pain and reward are unpredictably mixed over time. It is classical conditioning at its most destructive. Your nervous system is literally physically wired to seek comfort and safety from the exact same source that is causing your terror.
That's horrifying.
It is the identical psychological and neurobiological mechanism that keeps a hostage bonded to their captor in Stockholm Syndrome.
When I try to explain intermittent reinforcement to people, I always use the analogy of a broken slot machine because it perfectly illustrates the behavioral conditioning.
This is the perfect example.
If you walk into a casino, sit down at a slot machine, pull the lever, and every single time it just takes your quarter and does absolutely nothing, you are going to get bored and walk away in about 3 minutes. Your brain recognizes there is no reward.
Because the outcome is predictable and unrewarding, the behavior extinguishes quickly.
But if you sit at that machine and pull the lever, and sometimes it takes your money, Sometimes it literally shocks you with a jolt of electricity. But every once in a while, at completely random, unpredictable intervals, it flashes bright neon lights, rings the bells, and pays out a massive jackpot. You will sit at that machine until you are entirely bankrupt.
That is the power of intermittent reinforcement. Behavioral scientists have proven for decades that it is the single strongest, most resilient behavioral reinforcement schedule known to psychology. It creates obsessive, compulsive behavior.
So when the narcissist hoovers you, they are pulling the lever on that slot machine in your brain. They're flashing the jackpot lights.
And you get the chemical hit.
The love bombing, the fake apologies, the intense vulnerability they show you during the hoovering phase. It is neurologically wiring you to keep playing a game you are mathematically guaranteed to lose. You feel addicted to the abuser.
Yeah.
You know they're destroying your mental health. You can see it happening, but your body physically, viscerally craves the relief of their validation.
And this highlights why leaving a covert narcissist and staying away is universally described by survivors as one of the most difficult things a human being can do. You are not simply overcoming a psychological attachment or a bad habit. You are breaking a profound, deeply entrenched chemical addiction. Your body goes into physical withdrawal when you implement no contact.
But there is a way out. Here's where it gets really interesting, because this is where the behavioral science becomes incredibly empowering.
Yes, there are actual strategies.
Because once you understand the mechanics of this trap, and once you can see the neurochemical wires and the psychological pulleys operating behind the curtain, you can learn how to systematically disable it.
Yeah.
How do you actually defend yourself against a predator who knows exactly how to hack your empathy? How do you communicate with a person whose entire goal is to extract an emotional reaction from you to feed their false self?
You have to fundamentally change the rules of engagement. If they are an engine that runs on narcissistic supply, your only defense is to starve the engine. You have to remove the fuel.
Let's break down the defensive strategies to achieve that. The clinical and survivor literature overwhelmingly points to two highly effective behavioral techniques: the gray rock method and its more nuanced evolution, the yellow rock method. Let's start with gray rock. We hear this term everywhere now, but what is the actual psychological mechanism behind it?
The gray rock method is exactly what it sounds like. When you are forced to interact with a covert narcissist, you consciously choose to become as uninteresting, unresponsive, and emotionally dull as a literal gray rock on the ground.
You just shut it down.
Completely. You offer flat, brief, monotone answers. Yes, no, I don't know. Okay. You show absolutely no emotion on your face or in your voice, no anger when they insult you, no sadness when they play the victim, no joy if they try to flatter you.
You give them nothing.
You do not explain yourself. You do not defend your character. You do not argue logic. You deny them all emotional fuel.
Going back to our analogy, you intentionally become the broken slot machine. They pull the lever, they try to trigger you, and absolutely nothing happens. The screen stays blank.
Which is incredibly frustrating for them. If they hurl a deeply personal insult at you and you just shrug and look at your phone, they get no supply. If they collapse onto the floor sobbing about how unfair life is and you stare blankly and say, "That sounds difficult," and walk out of the room, they get no supply.
That has to drive them crazy.
Oh, it does. The goal is to make the process of interacting with you so incredibly boring and unrewarding that their brain eventually registers you as a dead battery and they pack up and look for supply elsewhere.
But looking through the vast amounts of Reddit threads and survivor forums in our source material, there is a massive hidden danger here that people need to be warned about.
The extinction bursts.
Yes. Survivors talk about this constantly. Going gray rock can, and usually does, trigger a psychological phenomenon called an extinction burst. When I read the clinical definition of an extinction burst, it immediately reminded me of a toddler throwing a tantrum in a grocery store.
It's the exact same principle.
If a toddler usually screams to get a candy bar,
Yeah.
and it works, they keep doing it. If the parent suddenly decides to ignore the screaming going gray rock, the toddler doesn't just politely say, "Oh, I guess that doesn't work anymore," and walk away.
Not at all.
The toddler screams 10 times louder, they throw themselves on the floor, they start pulling items off the shelves.
Yeah.
Is that essentially what is happening in the adult narcissist's brain?
That is exactly the mechanism. An extinction burst is a foundational concept in behavioral psychology. When a behavior that previously yielded a consistent reward, in this case, emotional manipulation yielding narcissistic supply, suddenly stops working, the organism does not simply give up. First, it tries much, much harder to get the expected result.
If the remote control stops working, you don't politely set it down. You smash the buttons harder and shake it.
Yes. When the narcissist's abuse stops getting your emotional reaction, their behavior dramatically escalates. They panic because they feel their control slipping and their supply drying up.
What does that escalation look like?
They may become wildly absurd in their accusations, violently angry, or intensely paranoid. They will say the most horrific, deeply personal things they can think of, purely to get you to flinch. They will escalate the hoovering attempts, perhaps showing up at your house uninvited, or they will escalate the smear campaigns, telling everyone you know that you have lost your mind.
So a victim attempting gray rock for the first time might experience this escalation and think, oh no, gray rock isn't working, it's making them crazier. I have to go back to managing their emotions.
That is the trap. The escalation is actually empirical proof that gray rock is working. You are successfully starving the behavior. The extinction burst is the final, desperate flare-up of a dying fire. If you can withstand the extinction burst without reacting, without breaking character, the behavior will eventually extinguish because it requires too much energy for zero reward.
But weathering that storm takes an unbelievable amount of psychological fortitude. And there's another major problem with gray rock that the literature points out.
Yes, the institutional problem.
If you are in a situation where you have to co-parent with a covert narcissist, or if you work in the same office and have to interact professionally, acting like a completely cold, robotic, emotionless stone can actually be weaponized against you.
They will absolutely use it against you.
In family court or in an HR meeting, the covert narcissist will point at your gray rock behavior and say, look at them. Look how cold, bitter, and uncooperative they are. I am trying to communicate reasonably for the sake of the children, and they are icing me out.
That is a very real danger. Gray rock can inadvertently make you look like the hostile, alienating party in formal, documented settings because the covert narcissist is a master at playing the calm, reasonable victim for an audience.
Which brings us to the evolution of the defense, the yellow rock method. What is this, and how does it solve the family court or HR problem?
Yellow rock is a highly strategic, nuanced evolution of gray rock. It is specifically used when contact is completely unavoidable. It combines the emotional neutrality and boundary setting of gray rock with basic, polite, unassailable social norms.
So you're not just a blank stare.
You are still a gray rock at your core, but you are painted yellow on the outside to look pleasant.
When I was thinking about how to visualize yellow rock, the best metaphor I could come up with is the martial art of Aikido. In Aikido, when an opponent lunges at you, you don't stand there rigidly and block the punch, absorbing all the impact. You simply step slightly to the side, maintaining your own center of gravity, and you let their own aggressive momentum carry them right past you harmlessly.
That is a beautiful way to think of it.
So instead of a flat robotic no, which absorbs the impact and creates friction, what does an Aikido-style yellow rock response actually look like in an email?
It looks like, thank you for letting me know. I will not be able to attend the meeting. Have a good weekend. You include standard pleasantries, please, thank you, have a good day. But you offer absolute zero emotional depth.
No over-explaining.
You provide no justifications for your actions, no explanations for your schedule, and zero personal information. You communicate exactly like a highly professional, polite customer service representative dealing with a mildly annoying client.
It's business casual communication.
It is entirely business casual. And the reason it works so brilliantly is twofold. First, it removes the emotional fuel. A narcissist gets zero narcissistic supply from a polite customer service email. There is nothing to feed on.
Right.
Second, it completely deprives the narcissist of the ability to claim you are being hostile, bitter, or uncooperative. If they take a stack of your yellow rock emails to a judge in family court or to an HR representative, you look perfectly polite, professional, and reasonable. And by contrast, their escalating demands, emotional outbursts, and paragraphs of accusations look utterly unhinged to the third party.
But here's the critical piece that I think we really need to explore, because understanding the concept of yellow rock is one thing, but executing it when your heart is pounding out of your chest is another.
It is incredibly difficult in practice.
How does a victim actually do this? If a narcissist is screaming at you or sending you a text message that attacks your deepest insecurities, your amygdala is firing, your cortisol is spiking, and your brain is screaming at you to defend yourself, how do you biologically regulate your nervous system in real time to maintain that pleasant yellow rock facade?
This is where the rubber meets the road in trauma recovery. You have to actively engage the parasympathetic nervous system to override the fight-or-flight response.
Right.
When the attack happens, before you speak, before you type a single word, you have to create a pause.
Like force yourself to stop.
You can use physiological tools like box breathing. inhaling for 4 seconds, holding for 4, exhaling for 4, which directly stimulates the vagus nerve. Stimulating the vagus nerve acts like a biological brake pedal for your anxiety, lowering your heart rate.
So you calm the body first.
Yes. And then you have to mentally detach and observe the narcissist, not as a threat, but as a clinical subject. You watch them throw their tantrum and you internally label it, there is the extinction burst, there is the desperate attempt for supply. You intellectualize the abuse to detach from the emotion of it.
That requires so much practice, but it sounds incredibly empowering to take control of your biology like that. I could hear a listener, though, asking a very valid philosophical question right now. Doesn't doing Yellow Rock mean you're just pretending? If I am putting on a fake customer service voice with someone who is supposed to be my family member or my co-parent, doesn't it feel like I'm losing my authenticity? Why should I have to walk on eggshells and be fake in my own life?
That is such a crucial, profound point. Many victims feel cognitive dissonance when they first employ Yellow Rock because they value honesty and openness. We need to reframe this completely. When you use Yellow Rock, you are not suppressing your true self. You are not being fake.
What are you doing then?
You are putting on strategic armor. You are recognizing a fundamental truth about human relationships. This specific person has not earned the right to experience your authentic, vulnerable self. Authenticity is a precious resource, and it is a gift that you only give to safe people.
Oh, I want to underline that twice. Authenticity is a gift for safe people.
You save your rich inner life, your true emotions, your empathy, and your vulnerability for the people who have proven they will cherish and protect it. You do not hand your most precious jewels to a thief. You use Yellow Rock to radically protect your peace from a predator. It is an act of profound self-love.
So, synthesizing everything we've uncovered in this massive stack of behavioral science and survivor accounts, what does this all mean for you, the listener, moving forward? If you recognize these patterns, the altruism trap, the empathy void, the collapse, the hoovering, in a partner, a parent, a boss, or a friend.
It means recognizing that you are dealing with a deeply ingrained, rigid personality structure that is highly unlikely to ever change.
They aren't going to wake up one day and get it.
No. Covert narcissism is rooted in profound, calcified defense mechanisms designed specifically to deflect all accountability. You cannot love them out of it. You cannot logic them out of it. You cannot send them enough books or articles to make them suddenly realize the error of their ways.
Because to the narcissist, the problem is never them. The problem is always the external world failing to appropriately recognize and cater to their specialness.
Therefore, your focus must shift entirely from trying to fix them, heal them, or manage their emotions to protecting yourself. Setting boundaries with a covert narcissist isn't about punishing them or teaching them a lesson. It is about radically protecting your own psychological safety. It is about reclaiming your reality from the fog of gaslighting.
And it is about breaking that trauma bond, stepping away from the broken slot machine, once and for all. We've gone on quite a journey today. From recognizing the incredibly subtle camouflage trap of the vulnerable narcissist, to understanding the terrifying neurochemical mechanics of their psychological collapse, to breaking down the biological addiction that keeps victims tethered to their abusers. We've looked at the machinery beneath the manipulation.
And we've equipped you with the armor, the gray and Yellow Rock methods, the aikido of communication to navigate the minefield if you cannot yet fully physically leave. The most important liberating takeaway is this. You do not owe anyone a response to their abuse. You do not owe anyone your empathy when they are using it as a weapon to drain your life force.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final lingering concept to mull over. Something that wasn't directly stated in our clinical sources, but builds on everything we've discussed today about the psychology of the human condition. We've spent a lot of time talking about the severe damage the covert narcissist does to their victims. But if we zoom out and look at the entire arc of their life, what is the ultimate tragedy of their existence?
It is the tragedy of the false self.
Think about it. The covert narcissist spends their entire life on a desperate, exhausting, nonstop campaign to manipulate others. They lie, they cheat, they play the victim, they destroy the mental health of the people who love them the most, all to protect this fabricated, grandiose, superior version of themselves. Deep down, beneath the fortress of anxiety, they are starving for love. They are starving for validation, for someone to tell them they're worthy. But here is the profound, devastating irony of their pathology. In their absolute refusal to ever put down the mask, to ever show their true, flawed, messy, vulnerable self, they actively annihilate the possibility of the one thing they are starving for.
Because you cannot receive authentic, unconditional love if you are wearing a mask.
You can never truly be loved if you never allow yourself to truly be known. Every compliment they manage to extract, every bit of sympathy they manipulate out of you with their tears, goes to feed the false self. It never reaches the wounded child inside. It never actually heals the shame. They are dying of thirst in the middle of the ocean, completely unable to drink a single drop because they're wearing a diving suit they're too terrified to take off. Understanding this doesn't excuse their abuse. It doesn't mean you should stay and endure it, not for a single second. But it is a haunting realization of the psychological prison they have built for themselves and locked from the inside.
It is a profound tragedy, and it underscores why your only viable path forward is to realize you cannot save them from their prison. Your only responsibility is to step out of it and walk back into the light of your own reality.
Keep your empathy for the people who deserve it. Stay curious, stay protected, and keep seeking the truth behind human behavior. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.